A walking ape, a hobbit human, and a girl born from two lost species. These real discoveries will blow your mind. For decades, I thought the story of Homo sapiens was simple. We evolved in Africa from a single ancestral population. But new breakthroughs in genetics have flipped that story on its head again. First, scientists showed that we all carry traces of Neanderthals and Denisovans in our DNA up to 5% and 3%, respectively. What once looked like side notes in human history turned out to be major chapters. And now, things just got even more fascinating. A recent study out of the University of Cambridge, published in Nature Genetics, revealed that modern humans don't trace back to just one ancestral group, but at least two. Using a powerful new algorithm called COBRA, researchers mapped the genetic fingerprints of early Homo populations across Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas. This tech let them piece together how ancient groups split, mingled, and merged again, showing that our evolutionary past is far more tangled than we ever imagined. According to their findings, about 1.5 million years ago, a common ancestor split into two distinct groups within Africa. These populations were genetically different and probably lived in very different environments. One faced brutal survival challenges, hitting a genetic bottleneck that almost wiped them out. The other thrived in more stable conditions, and their resilience may have shaped much of what we call humanity today. Then, about 300,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened. Those two groups came back together. And that reunion, scientists now believe, marks the true beginning of modern Homo sapiens. Here's the surprising part: about 80% of our genome today comes from the group that nearly went extinct, while only 20% comes from the one that actually thrived. This flips the old narrative completely. Evolution isn't a straight, neat line of descent. It's a messy web of interbreeding and gene flow between ancient populations, and that mixing was critical to our survival. For years, geneticists kept spotting mysterious signals in African DNA traces of an unknown ancestor that didn't match Neanderthals or Denisovans. Now, with the COBRA algorithm and a much wider sampling of African genomes, researchers have finally confirmed that long-suspected lineage. And this matters for a big reason. Africa holds the richest human genetic diversity on Earth, but it's been underrepresented in research for far too long. This new work helps fill that gap, and in doing so, it rewrites our entire origin story. We're not the product of one clean evolutionary line. We're the outcome of survival against the odds, of mixing and reunion. Our story is far more tangled and far more human than we ever imagined. In the heart of one of the most remote and mysterious jungles on Earth, I came across a legend that turned out to be real. Deep in the dense forests of the Democratic Republic of Congo, locals had always spoken about strange, human-like creatures, giant apes that walked upright, built ground nests, and showed no fear of people. Some even swore they hunted big animals and howled at the moon. For years, scientists brushed these stories off as nothing more than jungle folklore. But everything changed when researchers finally ventured into that forest. What they discovered was unlike anything they expected: a massive, little-known ape that didn't fit neatly into the categories of chimpanzees or gorillas. The locals call them the Bili Apes, after the region where they live. And yes, they're very real. These apes are enormous. Adult males can reach over 5 feet tall when standing, and researchers have reported watching them walk upright for long stretches, not just a few steps like other apes. That upright stance? It makes them look almost disturbingly human, like something straight out of Planet of the Apes. Their faces are flatter, their jaws more powerful, and their bodies more robust than the chimpanzees you usually see in nature documentaries. Here's the part that blew my mind genetically: the Bili Apes are chimpanzees. But when you look at how they behave, they're something else entirely. Instead of nesting high up in trees like most chimps do to avoid danger, they build their nests on the ground just like gorillas. It's as if they've claimed the forest floor as their throne. Then there's the hunting. These apes coordinate in groups, targeting monkeys and even antelope. That kind of behavior is almost unheard of for chimps. The more scientists observed, the more baffling it got. How could one group of chimpanzees act so differently from every other population on Earth? Were they a distinct group that had evolved separately for thousands of years? Or could they be giving us a glimpse into how ancient humans once behaved before civilization took hold? One leading theory points to isolation. The Bili forest is so remote, so dense and so untouched that these apes may have been cut off from others for countless generations. That isolation could have sent them down a completely unique evolutionary path. Researchers eventually gathered hair, fecal samples, and even camera trap footage to get a clearer picture of these mysterious apes. The results confirmed they're a unique subspecies of pan-troglodytes. But their physical traits and social behaviors don't fit neatly into any box we've seen before. Their skulls resemble gorillas more than chimps, their bodies are bulkier, their canine teeth are longer, and then there's that posture, upright walking, that seems almost casual, like it's second nature. Nobody's calling them a missing link, but the Bili apes definitely blur the line between human and non-human. And that's what makes them so captivating. They're living proof that evolution isn't a simple ladder, it's a web. Somewhere along that web, a group of chimpanzees adapted in ways we never expected, becoming creatures that walk like us, act like us, yet remain hidden in one of Earth's last true wildernesses. And here's the kicker: serious study of these apes only began in the last 2 decades. Which makes me wonder if something this extraordinary could stay off the radar for so long. What else is still out there, waiting in the shadows? Maybe the most thrilling part of all? The Bili apes are still out there today, moving through the vines, watching from the treetops, and living their lives just a few steps off the evolutionary path we humans ended up taking. In one of the darkest, most hidden cave systems beneath South Africa, scientists stumbled onto a discovery that rewrote a chapter of human history. Deep inside the Rising Star Cave, they uncovered more than 1,500 fossil fragments, the remains of at least 15 individuals. But here's the catch: they weren't apes, and they weren't exactly modern humans either. This was something entirely new. Meet Homo naledi. From the neck down, they looked surprisingly human. Their legs, feet, and hips were perfectly designed for walking upright. Their hands were capable of gripping tools, but their skulls? Tiny. Their brains were only about a third the size of ours, closer to a chimpanzee's than a human's. And yet, here's the twist that shocked everyone. Despite their small brains, Homo naledi may have been performing burials. Yes, burials. The fossils were discovered in a chamber so remote it could only be reached by crawling through narrow passages and plunging into complete darkness. There was no evidence of flooding, no signs of animal activity, just bones deliberately placed in one of the most inaccessible corners of the cave. Which suggests one mind-blowing possibility: these ancient beings carried their dead deep underground and laid them to rest. Not by accident, by choice. For years, the idea that a primitive species could grasp death like we do was laughed off. Burial was supposed to be something reserved for modern humans, maybe Neanderthals at best. But deeper excavations in that same cave started changing everything. Researchers found what might be deliberate etchings on the walls, possibly made by Homo naledi, along with signs that they may have even lit fires underground. It's like discovering that a species with a Stone Age toolkit also carried a spiritual life. If these findings hold true, Homo naledi could be the earliest species we know of to treat death with symbolic meaning. And they did it all with brains the size of an orange. Here's what really blows my mind. Homo naledi isn't some ancient relic from millions of years ago. They may have lived just 250,000 years ago, which means they existed at the same time as early Homo sapiens. That raises the biggest questions of all. Did we meet them? Did we trade knowledge? Could some of their behaviors have been passed on to us? What we're left with is a species that was small, unusual, and maybe even spiritual. They weren't our direct ancestors, but they may have shared something much deeper in understanding of life and of death. And in a world where we've long tied intelligence to brain size, Homo naledi is proof that mystery, meaning, and humanity can emerge from the most unexpected places. On a remote island in Indonesia, scientists uncovered a mystery that honestly feels straight out of science fiction. Back in 2003, inside Liang Bua Cave on Flores, archaeologists unearthed a tiny skull and right beside it, a matching skeleton. At first glance, everyone assumed it must have been a child. But no, this was an adult. Fully grown, standing only about 3.5 feet tall. Meet Homo floresiensis, better known as the Hobbit human. And, the nickname fits perfectly. These people weren't just small, they had tiny brains, short bodies, and lived in caves. But don't mistake them for primitive. They crafted tools, hunted animals, and may have even mastered fire. The wild part? They lived on Flores until at least 50,000 years ago, maybe even more recently. which means they could have shared the island with modern humans. And here's where the real mystery deepens. Their physical traits don't match modern pygmy populations or any other known human group. Some researchers think Floresiensis descended from Homo erectus and gradually shrank through a process called island dwarfism. Others argue they may have come from an even older hominin lineage altogether. Now here's the part that really gets me. Flores isn't the only island with stories like this. On nearby islands like Sulawesi and Luzon, archaeologists have found stone tools and even remains hinting at other small-bodied hominins. It's almost like this whole region once held a hidden world of tiny ancient humans, little civilizations lost to time and jungle. And then there are the legends. Local stories speak of small forest dwellers who avoided people and slipped away into the trees. It's hard not to wonder if those tales connect to the Hobbit fossils, even if there's no direct proof. The overlap between folklore and fossil is just too intriguing to ignore. For me, the discovery of Homo floresiensis was a turning point. It shattered the old belief that small-brained humans were destined to be primitive or short-lived. These people endured for hundreds of thousands of years alone, isolated, cut off from the rest of humanity. No wheels, no cities, just stone tools, resilience, and adaptability. They weren't monsters, they weren't myths. They were real humans just built differently. And thanks to one cave in Indonesia, we've added a whole new branch to the human family tree. One that proves our history is far stranger and far more diverse than we ever imagined. In the mountains of southwest China, deep inside a cool limestone cavern known as Red Deer Cave, scientists stumbled onto something they just weren't ready for. Human fossils that didn't fit into any category we knew. Thick skull bones, broad cheekbones, flat faces, a strange mashup of traits like someone had rewound human evolution and then hit fast forward again. So the question was obvious: who were these people? They became known as the Red Deer Cave people, named after the site where they were uncovered. And even now, their identity is still one of the biggest mysteries in anthropology. What makes it even stranger is the timing. These bones date back only about 14,000 years ago, basically yesterday in evolutionary terms. By then, modern humans had already spread across Asia, Neanderthals were long gone, and Denisovans were disappearing. The world was moving forward, and yet here was a group that looked ancient, almost like a remnant of early humans who should have vanished ages before. Some scientists believe the Red Deer Cave people were a late surviving branch of an older species like Homo erectus. Others think they were hybrids, a mix of archaic humans and modern Homo sapiens. Either way, they throw a wrench into everything we thought we knew about human history in Asia. Their jaws were broad and powerful, their skulls thick, and while their brains were modern in size, their shape carried traits closer to species that had disappeared more than 100,000 years earlier. And here's the eerie part: these weren't just scraps of bone. Archaeologists found complete remains, jaw bones, skull caps, leg bones, proof that this wasn't a passing group. They were established. They were thriving here. One theory even links them to Denisovans, that mysterious cousin species we still know so little about. But without full DNA from the Red Deer Cave fossils, it's all speculation. What we do know is clear: they didn't fit neatly into any box, and yet they existed alongside us. Their tools were simple, and there's no evidence of art or symbolic thought. But their ability to survive, especially in a world where Homo sapiens were rapidly taking over, is remarkable. Maybe their isolation in the rugged highlands of southern China shielded them, allowing ancient traits to linger long after the rest of humanity had changed. To me, the Red Deer Cave people are a reminder that our evolutionary story isn't a straight climb. It's a tangled forest, full of strange branches, some of which lasted far longer than anyone ever expected. In the little town of Dmanisi, Georgia, not the US state, but the country tucked between Europe and Asia, a group of farmers stumbled onto something that would rewrite our understanding of human migration. Beneath their fields, buried in layers of ancient sediment, they uncovered skulls. Not just one, but 5 astonishingly well-preserved skulls from some of the earliest members of the human genus. At first glance, researchers thought they'd uncovered evidence of multiple species. The skulls looked so different from one another, some with massive jaws, others with delicate faces, and still others with strange ridges and sloping features. It looked like a lineup of fossils from completely separate branches of evolution. But after closer study, the team realized something shocking: they all belonged to the same population, and most likely the same species, early Homo erectus. That realization sent shockwaves through the scientific world. The Dmanisi fossils turned out to be about 1.8 million years old, making them the oldest human remains ever discovered outside of Africa. And that instantly rewrote the timeline. These people, small-brained, primitive-looking, nothing like modern humans, had already left Africa much earlier than anyone thought possible. It wasn't a slow, careful migration led by advanced humans. It was more like a daring leap taken by an early group we never expected to see travel that far. And yet there they were, with stone tools in hand, living in what's now the Caucasus Mountains, hunting, building shelter, and adapting to a colder climate thousands of miles from their homeland. The real shock came from how different the skulls looked from each other. For decades, scientists assumed that every variation in fossil shape meant a whole new species. But the Dmanisi discovery forced a radical rethink. Maybe all those differently shaped fossils scattered across Africa and Asia weren't separate species at all. Maybe they were just regional variations of a single, incredibly adaptable early human. Suddenly, what once looked like a dozen different ancestors might actually boil down to one, a diverse, evolving species with lots of built-in flexibility. The Dmanisi site transformed a quiet Georgian hillside into a landmark of global science. It showed us that early humans were tougher, more mobile, and far more adaptable than we'd ever given them credit for. And most importantly, it reminded me that the story of where we came from is still unfolding often in the places we least expect. Sometimes the clearest proof of who we are doesn't come from bones, it comes from footprints. Out on the vast plains of Tanzania, researchers stumbled across what first looked like ordinary animal tracks. But when they studied them closer, they realized they were standing over something extraordinary, a frozen moment of prehistoric life. Human-like footprints preserved in hardened volcanic ash, dating back 3.6 million years. This was Laetoli. Discovered in 1978 by Mary Leakey's team, these weren't just old prints, they were groundbreaking. They belonged to Australopithecus afarensis, a species that lived long before modern humans. And yet, these ancient hominins were walking upright, on 2 feet, just like us. The trail captures at least 3 individuals moving together. One seems to pause, as if glancing around. Another leaves deeper prints, maybe carrying a child. These tiny details, frozen in ash, tell a story no skeleton ever could. Not only were they bipedal, they walked with confidence. Their stride and balance looked efficient, not clumsy or transitional. They were moving with purpose, millions of years before Homo sapiens appeared. And the story doesn't end there. In 2021, scientists revisited Laetoli and uncovered a second set of footprints nearby. These prints looked a little different, possibly made by another early hominin species, which means more than one type of human ancestor may have been walking upright in the same place at the same time. It completely overturns the old idea that upright walking was a slow, clumsy process. These tracks prove it happened far earlier and far more completely than anyone thought. And it wasn't some awkward shuffle, it was real walking heel-to-toe steps, arches in place, balance steady, and movement with intention. The Laetoli footprints might not look as dramatic as a fossil skull you can hold in your hand, but they're one of the clearest windows we have into human history. They capture the moment our ancestors stepped out of the trees and onto solid ground, a choice that changed how they lived forever. They didn't leave behind stone cities, carvings, or tools, but they left their footprints. And somehow that says more about them than anything else. Long before pyramids rose or stories were written, we walked. And that's where our story truly began. In a quiet cave hidden in the limestone hills of Luzon, the largest island in the Philippines, scientists uncovered something no one saw coming. The site, called Callao Cave, had already produced a mysterious footbone years earlier. But in 2019, new discoveries finally pieced the puzzle together. Fossils from at least 3 individuals' teeth, finger bones, and toes revealed an entirely new species of human Homo luzonensis. They were small, likely under 4 feet tall, and their skeletons showed a strange mix of traits, some ancient, some more modern. Their curved toes and finger bones looked like adaptations for climbing trees, echoing species as old as Australopithecus. Yet other features looked closer to more recent hominins. So who exactly were they? Dating tests showed they lived around 67,000 years ago, which puts them alongside modern humans, Neanderthals, and Denisovans. And like the Hobbits of Indonesia or Homo floresiensis, Homo luzonensis may have evolved in isolation, shaped by life on their island, far removed from the rest of humanity for tens of thousands of years. And here's the part that blows me away. Luzon has never had land bridges to mainland Asia, not even during the Ice Age. Which means Homo luzonensis, or their ancestors, had to cross the sea to get there. No boats, no advanced tools, maybe just sheer determination and the chance of drifting on logs or debris. For ancient humans, that wasn't just unusual, it was extraordinary. Like other hominins that ended up stranded on islands, Homo luzonensis probably evolved smaller bodies as a way to survive on limited resources. But what makes them so fascinating is their strange patchwork of traits, some pulled from our most ancient relatives, others looking surprisingly modern. That blend makes them one of the most puzzling branches of the human family tree ever discovered. And here's the kicker. They weren't the first to set foot on Luzon. Stone tools dating back 700,000 years have been uncovered on the island, hinting that early humans were there long before Homo luzonensis ever appeared. Which means there may be another ancestor species still hidden beneath the soil waiting to be found. For me, Homo luzonensis is a reminder that human evolution wasn't a straight line or confined to one place. Our story is scattered across continents and islands, tucked into dark caves and remote jungles. And sometimes all it takes to rewrite everything we thought we knew is a single toe bone sticking out of the dirt, just waiting for someone to notice. In a Siberian cave called Denisova, scientists came across a bone fragment no bigger than a coin. At first glance, it looked ordinary, just another fossil among the many ancient remains scattered in the cave. But when researchers sequenced its DNA, what they found was jaw-dropping. This tiny fragment belonged to a girl whose parents were from two entirely different extinct human species. Her mother was Neanderthal. Her father was Denisovan. For the first time in history, we had direct proof of a child born from two vanished human groups. Imagine finding someone whose mother came from one lost civilization and whose father came from another two ancient peoples who once walked the earth but left almost nothing behind except fragments of bone and whispers in our DNA. This girl lived about 90,000 years ago, and her genome gave us a snapshot of something we had only suspected before Neanderthals and Denisovans didn't just cross paths, they interbred. And not just once. Her DNA revealed signs of earlier mixing in both her mother's and father's ancestry, proving these encounters were happening more often than we ever imagined. What blows my mind is that both of these species were completely different from modern humans. Each had its own unique traits, behaviors, and adaptations. Neanderthals roamed across Europe and Western Asia, while Denisovans remained far more mysterious, mostly known from a handful of fossils scattered through Central and Southeast Asia. And yet, in this quiet cave in the Altai Mountains, their worlds intersected and gave us a child. It's proof that ancient humans weren't living in isolation. They crossed paths, exchanged genes, and influenced each other in ways we're only now beginning to piece together. That tiny bone fragment rewrote the human story. Instead of neat, separate roads, our past looks more like a tangled web full of crossings, surprises, and forgotten branches of humanity that once lived, loved, and disappeared. That's about it. What surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. For more useful information, watch other videos.